5-year-old Emma told the same story every day. My grandpa jumps from helicopters and catches bad guys. Teacher Miss Johnson would smile. What a wonderful imagination. On Veterans Day, when Emma's grandfather arrived at the preschool wearing his Special Forces beret and 6 medals, Miss Johnson's smile froze. At Sunshine Preschool in Fort Worth, Texas, little Emma Wilson was known for her stories. Every morning, during circle time, she had tales about her grandfather that seemed straight out of an action movie. My grandpa can see in the dark, she announced one Monday, her pigtails bouncing with enthusiasm. He has special goggles. Miss Sarah Johnson, a well-meaning teacher in her 30s, patted Emma's head. That's nice, sweetie. Does anyone else want to share? But Emma wasn't finished. And he jumps from airplanes, really high, with no ladder. The other children giggled. Parents dropping off their kids exchanged knowing looks, children and their imaginations. Emma has quite the creative mind, Miss Johnson told Emma's mother, Lisa, at pickup. Though some of her stories are rather violent, catching bad guys, weapons, perhaps monitor what she watches on TV? Lisa Wilson sighed. She tried explaining that Emma's stories were real, but it always sounded absurd. Her grandfather does tell her stories from his service days. Maybe he embellishes a bit. Of course, Miss Johnson smiled, that condescending smile reserved for parents in denial about their children's behavior. Grandparents do love their tall tales. As weeks passed, Emma's stories became more elaborate and specific. Grandpa Frank saved his whole team in the desert. He carried them one by one. My grandpa speaks 5 languages. He can talk to anyone. He has a scar from when bad guys caught him, but he escaped. During a parent-teacher conference, Miss Johnson brought up her concerns. Emma seems fixated on violence and military themes. It's affecting her play. Yesterday, she tried to teach other children tactical movements during recess. Lisa rubbed her temples. Miss Johnson, Emma's grandfather really was in Special Forces. I understand, Miss Johnson interrupted gently. Many veterans share war stories, but perhaps age-appropriate versions? Emma told the class about something called enhanced interrogation. That's concerning. Other parents had started complaining too. At a PTA meeting, Margaret Patterson, the head of the parent committee, raised the issue. That Wilson girl keeps telling my Timothy about people dying. Something about Grandpa's friends who didn't come home. It's disturbing. She taught my daughter how to do push-ups, military style. Added another parent. Since when do 5-year-olds need boot camp? The principal, Mrs. Dorothy Henderson, made a note to discuss this with Emma's family. Perhaps the grandfather needed boundaries about what stories were appropriate for children. Everything came to a head the week before Veterans Day. Emma brought her show-and-tell item, a photograph. This is my grandpa getting a medal from the president, she announced proudly. Miss Johnson barely glanced at it. Another family photo, probably from some local ceremony. Very nice, Emma. Who wants to go next? But Miss Johnson, Emma protested, it's the medal of Emma. We've talked about taking turns, Miss Johnson said firmly. David, show us what you brought. Emma sat down, clutching the photo, her little face crestfallen. At home that night, she told her grandfather about it during their video call. Nobody believes me, Grandpa Frank, she said sadly. They think I'm making it up. Master Sergeant Frank Wilson, retired, felt his heart break a little. At 68, he'd seen a lot, but his granddaughter's tears hit different. Emma Bear, he said gently, sometimes people don't understand things they haven't experienced. That's okay. But I'm not lying, Emma insisted. You do jump from helicopters. You do speak Arabic and Pashto and Spanish. You did save your friends. I know, sweetheart. Tell you what, I'm coming for Veterans Day next week. Would you like me to visit your school? Emma's face lit up. Really? You'll wear your uniform? Frank hadn't worn his dress uniform in years. But for Emma? You bet, Emma Bear? When Lisa told Miss Johnson that Emma's grandfather would be attending the Veterans Day celebration, the teacher's response was enthusiastic but patronizing. How wonderful. We love when family members share their service. We're having several veterans come. Mr. Peterson served in the motor pool in Germany. Mrs. Clark was a nurse in the Navy. Very inspiring for the children. The morning of November 11th, Sunshine Preschool was decorated with paper flags and red, white, and blue streamers. Parents and grandparents filled the small auditorium. Emma sat in the front row, practically vibrating with excitement. Miss Johnson stood at the podium. Welcome to our Veterans Day celebration. We're honored to have several veterans with us today. Let's start with Mr. Peterson, ... The presentations were sweet. Mr. Peterson talked about maintaining vehicles. Mrs. Clark shared stories about helping sick sailors. The children clapped politely. And now, Miss Johnson announced, Emma Wilson's grandfather, Mr. Frank Wilson, who served in the Army, Emma said. The back door opened. Master Sergeant Frank Wilson entered in full dress uniform. The first thing people noticed was his presence. At 68, Frank still moved with the controlled precision of a warrior. His uniform was immaculate, every ribbon perfectly aligned. The second thing they noticed were the medals. The Medal of Honor hung around his neck. Below it, row after row of commendations. Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor Device, Purple Heart with 2 oak leaf clusters, Distinguished Service Cross. The third thing they noticed was his beret, tan, the kind worn by only one unit in the U.S. Army. Several veterans in the audience immediately stood up. Mr. Peterson, who'd been sitting, practically jumped to attention. Frank walked down the aisle, his footsteps silent despite combat boots. Emma bounced in her seat. "That's my grandpa," she whispered loudly. Miss Johnson's face had gone pale. She fumbled with her notes. Master Sergeant Wilson, thank you for joining us." Frank took the podium. His voice was calm, measured, the voice of a man who'd given orders under fire. "Good morning. Emma asked me to tell you what I did in the Army." He smiled at his granddaughter. "Emma, come here." Emma ran to him. Frank lifted her easily, setting her on his hip like she weighed nothing. "Everything Emma told you is true," Frank began. "I was Delta Force for 22 years. I did jump from helicopters and planes at 30,000 feet. I do speak 5 languages because I operated in countries where communication saved lives. I have scars because sometimes the bad guys caught up with us." The room was dead silent. Several parents were recording on their phones. "This," Frank touched the Medal of Honor, "was for an operation in Afghanistan where my team was ambushed. 5 of my brothers were pinned down. I went back for them." Emma knows this story because she asked why I have nightmares sometimes. I believe in honesty with children. Margaret Patterson, who'd complained about Emma's violent stories, was crying. Frank continued, "Emma knows about my friends who didn't come home because we visit their graves. She puts flowers there. She knows about tactical movements because I taught her how to be aware of her surroundings. It's never too early to learn situational awareness." He looked directly at Miss Johnson. "My granddaughter doesn't have an overactive imagination. She has an accurate understanding of what her family members have done in service to this country. Perhaps the failure of imagination is in adults who can't conceive that heroes actually exist." Miss Johnson's face was burning red. I'm so sorry. We didn't." You didn't believe a 5-year-old, Frank said simply. Children often see more clearly than adults. He knelt to Emma's level. Emma Bear, show them the picture. Emma held up the photograph. Frank receiving the Medal of Honor from the president. Several parents gasped. Everything my granddaughter told you is true, Frank said. Next time a child tells you their grandparent is a hero, maybe listen. He faced the audience. I'll tell you what I did, but more importantly, why. Because Emma understands that some people dedicate their lives to protecting others. That's not fantasy. That's service. For the next 30 minutes, Frank spoke about protecting innocent people, about courage, about choosing dangerous jobs to keep others safe. The children were mesmerized. The adults were humbled. When he finished, the applause was thunderous. Veterans saluted. Emma beamed with pride. Miss Johnson approached after, tears in her eyes. I owe you both an apology. I dismissed her stories as fantasy. Frank's expression softened. You were trying to protect children, but sometimes protection means preparing them for reality. Would you consider coming back to teach about real heroism? Ask Emma, Frank smiled. She's my commanding officer now. Emma grinned. Grandpa can come every month. The story went viral. 5-year-old vindicated. Grandpa really is a superhero. At Sunshine Preschool, Miss Johnson instituted a new policy. Listen first, dismiss never. Emma became the most popular kid. She'd been telling the truth all along. 6 months later, Emma received the Truth Teller Award at graduation. Thank you for finally believing me, Emma said. My grandpa says truth is the most powerful weapon. Because sometimes it takes a 5-year-old to remind adults that heroes are real. They're somebody's grandparent. And sometimes they're exactly who a little girl says they are. You just have to listen.